You were taught a rule. Big monuments need kings. Kings need taxes. Taxes need farmers. No farmers, no civilization. That rule is wrong. And the proof is sitting in a Louisiana field, hidden under grass, 3,500 years old. 6 earthen rings, a mound 70 feet high, built without a king, without a farm, without a city, built by hunter-gatherers, people who fished, hunted, gathered nuts, people with no metal, no wheel, no writing. And they moved enough earth to fill 140,000 modern dump trucks by hand in baskets. No one was forced. No one was in charge. They came because they chose to come. This is Poverty Point, northeastern Louisiana, near a bend in the Mississippi. In its time, around 1700 to 1100 BCE, it was the largest monumental complex in North America, older than the Maya pyramids, older than the final stones at Stonehenge, older than the Olmec colossal heads. And for almost 2 centuries, archaeologists could not explain it because it broke their rules. The textbook said, a project this size needs a chiefdom, a ruling class, a permanent capital with farmers feeding the workers. Poverty Point had none of those things. So scholars assumed they had simply missed the evidence. They looked for the palace, they looked for the royal burial, they looked for the elite housing. For decades, they found nothing. No throne room, no king's grave, no images of a ruler, not one. In October of 2025, a new study finally said out loud what the dirt had been saying all along. The people who built this place were not subjects, they were equals, and they came here on their own feet. By the time you finish this video, you will not look at the word civilization the same way again. To understand why this is impossible, you have to start with the land itself. 3,500 years ago, the lower Mississippi Valley was a green, wet, generous world. Bayous full of fish, forests full of deer, hickory trees dropping nuts by the ton every autumn. No one needed to plant a field to eat well here. The land already fed them. These were people of the late Archaic period. The bow and arrow had not yet reached them. They hunted with the atlatl. A wooden spear thrower, a short stick with a hook. It doubled the force of a man's arm. They wove baskets from river cane. They worked stone into tiny blades. They cooked in earth ovens. And they moved with the seasons. Spring along the bayous, summer in the uplands, autumn under the nut trees. This is the world that should not have built a monument. And then, around 1700 BCE, it did. Picture the site as it stood at its peak. 6 concentric earthen ridges, like ripples frozen in the ground. Each ridge 25 meters wide at the base. The outermost ring stretches almost a mile across. You could fit dozens of football fields inside it. At the western edge, a great mound rises 70 feet into the sky. Archaeologists call it Mound A. It looks, from above, like a giant bird with outstretched wings. Some scholars think that was the point. Around the rings, smaller mounds, plazas, open spaces where thousands could gather under the same sky. And here is the detail that broke the experts. Mound A was not built over generations. Geological analysis of the soil layers shows no sign of rain between them, no erosion, no interruption. Which means this hill of earth, 230,000 cubic meters of it, went up in one dry season, less than 90 days, by human hands, carrying baskets, up a slope they had built the day before. Stop and feel that for a moment. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, working in coordinated rhythm. No foreman with a whip, no overseer counting heads, no granary full of taxed corn to feed them. How? That is the question that has driven archaeologists for 60 years. And the new answer is uncomfortable. No king ordered this. No god demanded this. They built it because they chose to. To see how, you have to throw away the modern picture of ancient construction. Forget the slaves of the pyramids. Forget the serfs of medieval cathedrals. That is not what was happening here. At Poverty Point, people came in groups. From the north, from the south, from the coast, from the hills. They came carrying things. Stone from the Ozarks, copper from the Great Lakes, soapstone from Alabama. Some had walked 500 miles. Some had paddled rivers for weeks. They knew where they were going. This was a meeting place, a trade fair, a festival ground, a construction site, all at once. And when the workday ended, they ate together, they danced, they sang, they renewed old ties. Then after weeks or months, they went home, carrying new tools, new stories, new marriages. The next year, or the year after, they came back, and the rings grew, and the mound grew. This is the world Veo cannot easily picture, so let me describe it slowly. A hot afternoon in late summer, the plaza below Mound A is full of people, hundreds of them. Women with long black hair tied back, baskets of dark earth balanced on their heads, walking up the slope. Men hauling loads of clay on hide slings, calling out a rhythm to keep the line moving. Children running between the legs of the workers, carrying water gourds, laughing, getting in the way. Old men sitting at the base of the mound, watching, advising, remembering when the ring was lower. Old women weaving cane mats in the shade, feeding small children, telling them what each layer means. No one is shouting orders. No one is crouched in fear. No one is starving. No one is a slave. And the mound rises, one basket at a time, one song at a time, one generation at a time. Here is where I have to stop and warn you about a word: civilization. In school, you were taught that civilization is a ladder. Bands, tribes, chiefdoms, states, empires. Each rung supposedly more advanced than the last. Each rung requiring more inequality, more control, more force. Anthropologists used to repeat this ladder like scripture. Then, in the last 20 years, the ladder broke. Sites like Poverty Point and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and Watson Break just upriver refused to fit. These were monuments built by people who, by the old rules, were not civilized enough to build them. And yet there they stand, 3,500 years later, visible from satellites, undeniable. So either the people were more complex than we thought, or the ladder was never real. If you want more stories that break the ladder, stay with us. There are many. Most of them happened on this continent. Now, what did they actually do at Poverty Point? What was the work for? We have clues. Tens of thousands of clues, in fact, buried in the rings. The first one is small, round, and made of clay. Archaeologists call them Poverty Point objects. They look like lumpy little dumplings, different shapes, bicones, balls, melon-ribbed, finger-grooved. For decades, no one knew what they were for. The answer turned out to be cooking. In a place with no good stones for fire pits, you make stones from clay. You heat them. You bury food with them. An earth oven lined with hot clay balls can roast meat or steam fish for a whole gathering. Tens of thousands of these objects have been found at the site. Tens of thousands of meals. The second clue is the plummet, a teardrop of polished stone, drilled at the top, hanging from a cord. They are net weights, thousands of them, which means industrial scale fishing, feeding crowds, not families. The third clue is the microblade, a tiny stone blade, sharper than a modern razor, struck from a prepared core. These were made here in numbers no other archaic site can match. They cut, scraped, carved, traded, and the fourth clue is the most quietly stunning, the exotic stone. Look at a map of Poverty Point's trade reach, and your jaw should drop. Quartz crystal from the southern Appalachians, 600 miles east. Copper from the Lake Superior region, 1,000 miles north. Steatite soapstone, soft and carvable, from northern Alabama, 300 miles east. Gray flint from southern Illinois. Galena, a heavy lead ore, from Missouri. Slate from the Ohio Valley. All of it found in the rings. Worked, used, discarded, traded. Again, this was not a village. This was a node, a hub on a continental web of human movement. And every one of those traveling traders walked. There was no horse in the Americas. There would not be for 3,000 years. They walked, they paddled, they portaged. They came because Poverty Point was worth coming to. Which raises the deepest question. What made it worth coming to? Why would a man from the Great Lakes carry a copper nugget 1,200 miles south to leave it on a Louisiana ridge? Why would a woman from the Tennessee River paddle for weeks to bring soapstone bowls to people she had never met? Archaeologists have argued about this for half a century. The honest answer is, we are not sure. But the best current thinking goes like this. Poverty Point was not just an economic center. It was a place where the world was renewed, where alliances were remade, where the calendar reset, Some of the mounds align with equinox sunset. The geometry of the rings is mathematically precise. This was a sacred ground. The work itself was the worship. The earth they piled up was the prayer. And when you build something sacred together, you do not need a king to make you show up. No king ordered this. No god demanded this. They built it because they chose to. Now we have to talk about the silence at the heart of this story. Around 1100 BCE, give or take a century, Poverty Point was abandoned, not destroyed, not burned, not conquered. The people simply stopped coming. The trade routes went quiet. The earth ovens cooled. The rings stood empty under the Louisiana sky, and no one rebuilt. No one moved in. No one carried the tradition to a new site. 3,000 years passed. Forests grew over the ridges. Animals dug into the mound. The Mississippi shifted course. The descendants of these people, the ancestors of today's Choctaw, Chickasaw, Tunica, Natchez, kept their land. But they did not build another Poverty Point. The model itself was set down. Why? Climate shift, some say. The medieval warm period was still distant. Cooling and drying may have thinned the food base. Internal change, others argue. Maybe the meaning ran out. Maybe the rings were finished. Maybe the gathering simply became too large to manage without the very hierarchy they had refused to build. We do not know. We may never know. The site does not speak that part of its story, but it speaks loudly about the part it does keep. Walk the rings today, and you can still feel them. Ridges 5 feet high under the prairie grass. The great mound, eroded but standing. The geometry, still legible from the air. In the 19th century, white settlers found this place and could not believe native people had built it. They invented imaginary mound builders, a vanished white civilization conveniently destroyed before settlers arrived. This was a lie, a useful lie, told to justify taking the land. The mound builders were the ancestors of the people still living there. It took 100 years for archaeology to admit the obvious. Poverty Point is the work of indigenous Americans, and it is one of the great achievements of the ancient human world, not a regional curiosity, a global landmark. The United Nations agreed. In 2014, Poverty Point was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Now, circle back to where we started. The school rule, civilization needs kings. Egypt had pharaohs, Mesopotamia had priest kings, China had emperors, Rome had senators, and then Caesars. And we drew a straight line from those pyramids and palaces to ourselves. Inequality, we told each other, is the price of progress. But Poverty Point was built without that price, by people who walked away when the work was done, by people who carried no master's name in stone, by people who chose every season to come back or not. This is not a fantasy. This is not a utopia. They worked hard. They argued. They probably suffered. But the structure of their society was different from the one we were told was inevitable, and it built monuments anyway. In 2021, two scholars named David Graeber and David Wengrow wrote a book that shook anthropology to its bones. Their argument: human societies have always experimented with hierarchy, without it, seasonally, reversibly, creatively. They asked the question we should all be asking, not when did inequality begin, but how did we get stuck in one shape? Poverty Point is one of their answers, a physical answer, in earth and stone, 3,500 years old. If this changed how you see the deep past and how you see the present, stay with us. The next stories are even stranger. There is one more image I want to leave you with, a scene that captures everything this place was. Imagine the last great gathering at Poverty Point. The work on the rings is finished. The mound is at full height. Hundreds of people stand in the central plaza at sunset. Drums begin in a slow building rhythm. An elder, not a king, not a priest, just an old person with long memory climbs the slope of Mound A. At the top, she raises her hands to the western sky. The sun touches the horizon. The crowd falls silent. No one bows. No one kneels. No one is below anyone. The hierarchy in this moment is between the people and the sky. And then, as the light goes red, they begin to sing, a song we will never hear, in a language no one alive can speak. This is what civilization looked like once on this continent. Before the kings, before the empires, before us. No king ordered this. No god demanded this. They built it because they chose to. So here's the worldview shift, if you want to take it with you. Every city you have ever lived in was designed on the assumption that humans need to be ruled. Every history textbook you ever read assumed that monumental things require monumental power. Poverty Point says, maybe that was never the only option. Maybe it was just the option that wrote the books. The people who piled up these rings did not leave us a name for themselves. They left us the rings. And the rings are still there in northeastern Louisiana, waiting under the grass. You can drive there. You can walk them. You can stand on top of Mound A and look out over a landscape shaped by hands that refuse to be commanded. And maybe, standing up there, you will ask yourself the dangerous question. The one Poverty Point is still whispering. If they could do this without kings, without armies, without forcing each other, then what is our excuse? What does that say about every story we tell ourselves about why the world has to be the way it is? 3,500 years ago, in a Louisiana floodplain, a different answer was tried. It worked long enough to leave a mountain of earth behind. It worked long enough to outlast every empire that came after. And then those people walked home. And they took the secret of how they did it with them. We are still trying to figure it out. The rings are patient. They have waited this long. They will wait a little longer, while we decide whether we want to learn what they have to teach. This was Poverty Point, the monument that should not exist, the civilization that refused to be one. If you made it this far, you now look at the map of ancient America differently, and maybe the map of today too. In our next video, we will follow the trade routes that fed this place, the 1,000-mile walks, the river highways, the men and women who carried copper from the Great Lakes to the Gulf. Who were those travelers? How did they survive the journey? Who fed them along the way? That is a story almost no one tells. And it explains why Poverty Point was possible in the first place. Because no monument stands alone. Behind every great gathering is a network of feet and rivers and trust. Subscribe, and we will walk those routes together, mile by mile, from the cold north to the warm south. And as always, all of this happened before Europe even knew this continent existed. Until next time.